And then a common trap people fell into in those scenarios is that when they kind of run out of things to say, or things they said is running short, they start to think logically, what do they need to say next? What are some topics they can bring up? What are some questions they can ask? Hey, what's up guys, it's Carl here. In this week's video, the topic I want to talk about is how to not run out of things to say in a conversation. And this is a very common problem for people, especially when you are not the extremely sociable type of person. You definitely have this in your life, or at least you worry about this once in a while. You know, whether that's a party, social events, job interviews, sometimes even just a random encounter on the street when you're talking to someone you don't know very well, or if it's a stranger. Chances are you got into a very awkward silence and you cringe so much just by thinking about it. And back in the days, this was a huge problem of mine as well. I feel like this was my biggest sticking point when it comes to communication, when it comes to talking to people. And back in the days, I actually watched a lot of these street interview content because I feel like all these street interviewers are really good conversationalists. Is that a word? Like someone who's really good at holding and carrying a conversation. And from all those conversations, what I did there was I was trying to look for a pattern. Is there a certain formula or logic how they get back to people? Because people's different responses and reactions, right? Like how do they get back to those things? How do they ask follow-up questions? How do they carry on the conversation? And it's almost like I was thinking they prepare so well that they have this 500-page PDF thing in their brain that's filled with all those questions, all those topics, all the response to prepare for all possible situations and outcomes. That's why they never run out of things to say. That's why they're always able to carry a conversation. But then as I grew deeper understanding in this topic and combined with my personal experiences in talking to more people, especially strangers, I went to different venues, different networking events, different activities, meeting new people, and kind of just testing some of the hypotheses and learn. I kind of just realized a lot of times when a conversation gets really interesting, they just kind of get going with no one running out of things to say. It really just comes down to being improvised and instantaneous. Like nothing is prepared beforehand. Even though I agree, sometimes a certain level of preparation helps, but that's not the main problem. And then after testing some of these hypotheses out in the field, in the reality, I start to notice something differently from these street interview content. And I'll give you one very good example. So this guy called Torres Pitt, who I first watched on YouTube, in every single one of his street interviews, like every time he was talking to a stranger, he was able to both lead and carry this conversation. And one thing I noticed the most is that comparing to other street interviewers, he's always having a really good mood. Like he's in a really good state. He's feeling really good about himself. And I think that rule also applies to other good street interviewers. So what I noticed there was, whenever a conversation or an interview goes well, where you notice this conversation is in a chill, fun vibe and no one needs to worry about running out of things to say, the interviewees are pretty comfortable and willing to share. Oftentimes, this interviewer, before they approach this conversation, or when they're in the conversation, they're feeling pretty good about themselves. And that's the reason these interviewers are being able to improv on the spot and being creative and ask all these following questions and, keep sparking the conversation and get them going and carry them on. A lot of times when people are not able to improv or being instantaneous in a conversation is that they probably have something negative going on within them. Like they're feeling some bad emotions such as insecurities, fear, or anxieties. And that's what's holding them back. And then a common trap people fell into in those scenarios is that when they kind of run out of things to say, or things they said is running short, they start to think logically, what do they need to say next? What are some topics they can bring up? What are some questions they can ask? And this whole thing is kind of just strengthen this already negative emotion. And that's just making this whole situation worse. And another common problem people have is that they have such high bar in the things they want to say. It's like they already have those emotions and thoughts in their brain. But then when it comes to saying those things out, they have such high bar and criteria. They kind of just filter them out because it's like they want to say the most interesting thing that impress people. They want to say the right thing. But in my opinion, that thing doesn't exist. Because if you're always going to be a perfectionist, you're not going to say anything. So lastly, the takeaway for this video is that to address running out of things to say in a conversation, instead of focusing so much on the topic, the things you're going to say, the questions you're going to ask, you're more like imposing a certain agenda onto other people, but you cannot control other people. And sometimes they're not going to go in the way you want them to. Try to put more thoughts and attention in your feeling whether that's in the moment or before you get into this conversation. And then just for a disclaimer, I'm not saying you should never run out of things to say in every single conversation or scenarios. There are times you naturally just don't feel very comfortable in maybe certain venues, maybe certain people you just meet for the first time. So those are the times there's nothing you can do. It is what it is. I guess the best thing you can do in those moments are just kind of embrace those feeling of awkwardness and experience those things. Those are the learnings you gotta experience in your life. I hope this video is helpful, and I hope this brings some new perspectives to you. And thank you for watching this far. Lastly, I just have a special announcement here. I'm going to launch an English conversation course at the end of this month or next month, which currently has over 100 conversations with practical situations in English-speaking countries, particularly in the North America. And all these materials, all the content are original and exclusive, which you cannot find elsewhere on the internet. And this course is going to be very helpful for people who's never lived in English-speaking countries, but planning to. For example, for those people who is moving to English-speaking countries to work, to study, or just for traveling, it's going to be very helpful for you to navigate those conversations in, for example, coffee shop, booking for internet services, hospital, and restaurants, etc., etc. And I'll be teaching and explaining in detail how to navigate those conversations in those daily talking scenes. So if you're interested, you can find it in my bio, and I'll be posting more detail later on. So stay tuned. Thank you.